When people think of World War II, they usually remember the battles. They remember the beaches of Normandy, the skies above Britain, and the ruined cities of Europe. They think of tanks, warships, and famous generals standing over maps that would determine the fate of nations. But behind every army, every victory, and every act of survival stood another force. An army that often wore no medals and received little recognition. An army of women. They were factory workers and farmers. They were nurses and teachers. They were mothers, daughters, and sisters. They were pilots, codebreakers, resistance fighters, and spies. Some carried weapons. Others carried secrets. Many carried responsibilities so heavy that they changed the course of their entire lives. Without these women, the Second World War would have been a completely different war. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, the world entered a period of destruction unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. Within days, Europe was at war. Soon, the conflict spread across continents, drawing in countries and people from every corner of the globe. Millions of men left their homes and joined the armed forces. They marched toward uncertainty, leaving behind families, jobs, and entire communities. Suddenly, nations faced a crisis. Factories still needed workers. Food still needed to be produced. Hospitals still needed staff. Trains still needed operators. Children still needed care. The entire machinery of society had to continue functioning. And so women stepped forward. For many, this was the first time they had been asked to perform tasks that society had traditionally reserved for men. They entered factories, offices, farms, and military organizations in numbers that had never been seen before. The change was enormous. Almost overnight, millions of women found themselves carrying responsibilities that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. In factories across the world, women began producing the equipment that armies desperately needed. They built tanks. They assembled aircraft. They manufactured ammunition. They inspected engines and repaired machinery. The work was exhausting. The shifts were long. The conditions were often difficult and dangerous. Yet every person in those factories understood something important. Every piece of equipment they built could save lives on distant battlefields. A pilot could not fly without an aircraft. A soldier could not fight without supplies. An army could not move without equipment. Victory itself depended upon the people working behind the front lines. And among those people were millions of women. Many worked until their hands became rough and painful. Many returned home exhausted only to wake up and repeat the same routine the following day. They worked not because it was easy. They worked because they believed it mattered. But factories were only one part of the story. Thousands of women entered military service. Many became nurses. They worked in military hospitals where they witnessed suffering on an unimaginable scale. Every day brought wounded soldiers. Some had lost limbs. Some had been severely burned. Some arrived carrying physical injuries that would never fully heal. The nurses treated them all. They cleaned wounds. They changed bandages. They administered medicine. And perhaps most importantly, they offered comfort. Many soldiers were young men far from home, frightened and uncertain about whether they would survive. The presence of a nurse could provide hope in moments of despair. These women worked under enormous pressure. Some served close to active battle zones. Bombs sometimes fell nearby. Medical supplies were often limited. The number of wounded sometimes seemed endless. Yet they continued. They continued because every life mattered. Other women served as radio operators, mechanics, clerks, and drivers. Some transporting supplies. Others maintained communications between military units. Some learned to fly aircraft, transporting planes from factories to operational bases. Every role was important. Every task contributed to the larger war effort. And yet perhaps the most dangerous roles belonged to the women who entered the hidden world of resistance and espionage. In occupied countries, many women refused to accept foreign rule. They joined underground organizations and secret networks. Their work was incredibly dangerous. They carried messages hidden inside books, clothing, and bags. They guided escaped prisoners to safety. They hid resistance fighters and downed pilots inside their homes. Some distributed illegal newspapers and organized secret meetings. They lived under constant fear. A single mistake could mean arrest. An unexpected search could mean imprisonment. A careless word could mean death. Yet they continued. Their battlefield was different. Their weapons were information and courage. By day, they appeared ordinary. They visited markets, worked jobs, and spoke with neighbors. By night, many became participants in a hidden war that could determine the future of their countries. Some women became spies. They gathered information about enemy movements and military positions. They memorized details and delivered messages that could influence military operations. Their work required patience, intelligence, and remarkable bravery. Some were eventually captured. Some were imprisoned. Some were tortured. Many never returned home. Yet even knowing the risks, countless women continued their missions because they believed freedom was worth every sacrifice. The war demanded an enormous price from women everywhere. Millions lost fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons. Many became widows while still young. Others became refugees, forced to leave behind homes and possessions. Entire cities were destroyed. Food became scarce. Fear became part of everyday life. Air raid sirens interrupted meals, sleep, and ordinary routines. Children grew up surrounded by uncertainty. For countless families, every day brought new worries. Would loved ones return from the front? Would the next bombing destroy their homes? Would tomorrow bring good news or tragedy? Women carried these burdens while also caring for children and elderly family members. They stood in long lines for food. They repaired damaged homes. They attempted to maintain some sense of normality while the world around them seemed to collapse. Their resilience was extraordinary. It was not always dramatic. It did not always make headlines. But it kept communities alive. Then, after 6 long years, the war finally came to an end. In 1945, celebrations erupted across the world. Church bells rang. Crowds gathered in the streets. People embraced complete strangers. The fighting had ended. But the world had changed forever. And women had changed with it. They had demonstrated courage under unimaginable pressure. They had shown that they could lead, organize, build, and endure. They had performed jobs once considered impossible. They had proven that strength comes in many forms. Some returned to their previous lives. Others continued pursuing careers that had once seemed unattainable. The experience of war had changed expectations. It had opened doors. It had altered the way society viewed women's abilities and contributions. The legacy of these women would continue influencing future generations long after the guns had fallen silent. The women of WWII did not all become famous. Many names have been forgotten. Many stories remain untold. Some returned home and lived ordinary lives. Others never came home at all. But together they formed one of the greatest forces of courage in modern history. They built. They healed. They resisted. They endured. And in doing so, they changed the world. When we remember the Second World War, we should remember not only the armies and the commanders, but also the millions of women whose sacrifices, determination, and courage helped shape the outcome of history. Because history is not made only by those who command soldiers or win battles. Sometimes history is made by ordinary people who choose courage when courage is needed most. These were the women of WWII. Their war was often fought in silence, their sacrifices were immense, and their legacy lives on.